All right, are back here on Patriots No Huddle, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Derek Haven, Steve Balsherry. No Mike Diabate today, just the two-man band here. Derek and Steve, we are talking about the 2026 NFL Draft. As we continue our prospect breakdown, we are, let's see, Steve, we have 4 positional groups to go. We got one show today doing the back end. We're talking safeties and cornerbacks today. Next week, we're going to get into the front 7, and I know that's going to be a really exciting show. We'll make sure we post that one on Twitter so we can stream it live and do the whole thing, because I know people are going to want to talk about that. Steve and I also have our annual mock draft coming up. We got hopefully a special guest soon that anyone who listens to the show will certainly be familiar with. So we have a couple of fun things in the work here on Patriots No Huddle. But before we do anything, Steve, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Hey, it's a beautiful day. I mean, a little chilly up there in Boston. I was looking at a little bit of the Red Sox game. I mean, a gorgeous day up there. The sun was out, but it was really cold up there. Everyone was bundled up. But on TV, it looked nice and warm.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's plenty warm here in Scottsdale, Arizona. That is for dang sure. Sorry about the back, though. That is not fun. Before we jump into our prospect breakdown, same format as we've been doing, we're going to talk about safeties, kind of tie it into our thoughts on the overall class, thoughts on some of our players, not necessarily just by round, but kind of by sections, day 1, day 2, day 3. We've been doing it for a while. Those who have listened before probably have heard some of the shows, and if you haven't, thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, like, share, leave us a review. Apple Podcast, Spotify keeps us high in those rankings, so other Patriots fans can find us. But see, before we jump into that, there was a trade the Patriots made yesterday. It is kind of, I would say, the quiet before the storm has set in around the NFL. You had the owners' meetings, and certainly some, always some speculation coming out of there, and some rumor
Lots of
mill churn.
speculation.
Yeah, but we'll table some of that talk for now. We'll save that for the off-air show. I think before the draft here, which we are just about 15 days away now, we are recording this on April 8th at a little after 4 o'clock Eastern time. So Marte Mapu was set to be released, Steve. The Houston Texans and the Patriots came to a then agreement. Was first reported by I saw Mike Reese, and it was in exchange for the Patriots traded Marte Mapu and the 2027 NFL draft pick in the 7th round for a 2027 6th rounder. So not much, just to even get the pick swap, which was your point, Steve, prior to the show going live. I think is always a good coup to get when you're going to release a player. Sometimes a team sees enough value in him, Steve, to go ahead and make sure that he doesn't get poached on the waiver wire by other teams that might want him. And you can secure getting a player that you think might fit into your defense, which obviously D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio and the guys in Houston think they can do with Mapu. And certainly he brings an interesting skill set, although he hasn't found a home. Or didn't find a home in New England, but the Patriots go ahead, improve some draft stock. Even if it's minor, it helps, especially if you were going to get nothing in return for it anyway. So give me your first and really impression of the trade. Any thoughts on Marte Mapu, the play, before we dive into these selections for the
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, they were set to release him. And, because he never really found a niche. I mean, he played very well on special teams, and I thought he did well there, but defensively he was never really able to find a niche where you could point your finger and say, this is where we need to have him. I know, like his first couple of years under Belichick and then Gerard Mayo, they kept trying to slot him in as a safety, which really wasn't a great fit for him. Last year Mike Vrabel decided, hey, you're going to practice as strictly as a linebacker and a special teams guy, but he wasn't really able to find that, that role for himself defensively. So I kind of knew where they were coming from when, Mike Reese announced that they were getting set to release him. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, man, the depth at linebacker now is really, really thin. even though he didn't play a big role as a linebacker. But they've already cut loose. Jelani Tavai, now Mapu, Jack Gibbons went elsewhere. I mean, they've lost a lot of people there. But at the same time, look, at the last minute, the Texans felt like they could find a slot for him, which is great for Mapu, because now you have a team that really wants you. They're willing to make a trade. And even though it was very minimal, compensation for him, the fact that the Patriots got anything for him, I think is a positive, because they were getting ready to just release him. So I think that was a really good move by Elliott Wolf, that he was able to swing a trade for him. And it's good for Mapu. Maybe the Texans will find a spot for him. I mean, the guy's super athletic. I remember when the Patriots drafted him, we were raving about his athleticism. So, but it just never worked out for him. And I think, part of that had to do with, the previous regimes, that they try to fit a square peg in a round hole, and I felt bad for the guy, because I always liked him. I thought, he had that ability that I thought was going to blossom as that sub-package guy flying all over the field, but it just never materialized for him.
Sometimes, Steve, when you have a guy that can fit into a lot of places, but doesn't really have a true home, that can happen, and that's the gamble. And I totally concur with everything that you said, and it stinks. I think we had an interesting conversation about how teams can fail players. I think you see that a lot with the quarterback position, and there have been times in the past where I think you've seen that. I think David Carr, Derek Carr's brother, back for the Texans. I think the Texans failed him back in the day, to a pretty bad extent. Now, whether he could have played or not, I guess, should be determined, but he didn't even have a chance. I would argue.
I thought he was a better quarterback than his brother.
Yeah.
I really did. It's just, they had no offensive line for him, and he just took such a beating. And look, I know, really dating myself here, but you go back to Archie Manning, same thing with the Saints, right? I thought Archie was probably more talented than his son, or sons, I should say, but he played on really terrible teams, and he was never able to really show what he could do. And sometimes that happens. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think the Patriots did right by Mapu. I don't think they did right by Mac Jones either.
Yeah, no, I think we did mention Mac Jones, so I think you could throw that into. And just because that you'd think a player might have never reached the level that you would aspire to, you can see you can see situations across the league where maybe teams failed them, a certain player at times, to at least stunt their development. And I certainly think you could make the case for Mac Jones there a little bit, but that's kind of a different topic for a different day. Staying in the Marte Mapu vein, I think that you could see a player like Isaiah Simmons, that came out of a very good Clemson defense, goes to Arizona, jack of all trades. Obviously, this is a Marte Mapu on steroids. You're talking about a top, 10 pick or whatever it was, top 5 pick. I forget where he was drafted. And, and it just never really materialized for him. Was it the Cardinals or the Giants who drafted him? I don't know. Either way, either way, I just think that it can happen. And, hopefully Mapu catches on there. So I think it's worth an interesting talking point, because it does talk about development, and positions matter. And when you're talking about the safety position, look at this transition, Steve. You're talking about versatility. And this 2026 draft class has a ton of guys that, man, there's a few positions, Steve, in this draft that align really well with what the Patriots, some positions that could really suit them as they look to improve their roster. And the safety position has a ton of Baskin-Robbins types players, meaning there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different styles, and there's guys that bring different things to the table. And if you look at the top, I want to start with Caleb Downs. No shot he's going to be there for the Patriots, obviously at 31. I would really say that Caleb Downs, for me, is kind of the top, and he's in a tier of his own. And then you would have I would put Emmanuel McNeil Warren and Dylan Thieneman right there, and then I think you have a good clump there. And this, if I'm kind of putting him in tiers, Steve, I would have Caleb as the kind of the cheese that stands alone. Incredible player. And he's I think he's going to be a really good pro for a long time. I just wanted to mention that off the top. He's an easy player to really like.
Yeah, I think Downs is like, I think he's head and shoulders above everyone else. Not to denigrate the other two guys you just mentioned, McNeil Warren and Thiemann. I mean, those guys are outstanding as well. But I just think Downs is like a step over everybody. And yeah, I don't see him being there at 31. And the other thing, I don't see the Patriots looking for a safety in the first round because I think they're pretty well set right now for having two starters. They definitely need some depth there. They definitely need another guy that can step up and play. I just don't think it's going to be round one.
Yeah, and I think I think as you're talking about the Patriots, it's going to be interesting to see where they go because we could see. I definitely think safety is a position they could target. That did seem like a bigger need before the Kevin Byard signing, but given Kevin Byard's age and the fact he signed a 1-year deal, I certainly would not rule out safety. If they took a safety in the first round, it wouldn't stun me. It wouldn't stun me. It would be surprise. It'd be surprised, but I wouldn't be stunned. I mean, I could absolutely see them taking a safety in day 2, second or third round. I'm starting to think it might not happen because I think that there are a couple other needs that I think just based on the tea leaves they're going to address. But there's some guys that I really like, and this is a fun group to talk about, Steve. For me, well, we will have a good conversation about it. I mean, Dylan Thieneman, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, both players I like. Both players are really interesting. I think Emmanuel McNeil Warren has a little bit more. I think there's Boomer Bust seems a little bit strong, but his projection to me has a little bit more variance than Thieneman. I think that McNeil Warren has the ability, based on what I've seen, and what my takeaway is, I think McNeil Warren could be the best safety. I think he could be as good a safety as Caleb Downs, if not better, in the league. I think he's a tremendous player. I also think there's a chance where Dylan might be more kind of steady Eddie a little bit, where I can see his projection being maybe a little bit safer. Even if the ceiling is not as high, the floor might be higher. But man, McNeil Warren just flies around and he's a fun
Yeah.
player.
And you got to love the length, right? He's 6'3". The only thing you might be able to point out with him is the fact that at Toledo he didn't really play against the level of competition like Downs or Thiemann did, being at Ohio State or Oregon. But I don't think you can doubt his ability. I really like him as well. I just think he's probably going. I could see McNeil Warren going late first, early second.
I could see him going pretty much anywhere from, call it the middle of the first round to top 10 picks of the second round. So what is that? Like, call it pick 17-ish, whoever's picking there, to like 42. I know that's a pretty wide range, but that's the window. I see that. Unless I don't see him falling out of the top 10 on day 2. I really think if he's not taking day 1, it'll be very shortly, very early on the night on Friday. So we'll see. He obviously does play with an incredible aggressiveness, and that can bite you sometimes. And this is kind of an interesting conversation, Steve, because I want to actually cherry pick that thought into what the Patriots want at the safety position as a whole, because it seems like they might not want the Jabril Peppers type of linebacker. They might want more guys who are kind of more rangy on the back end now, and maybe they're doing some more patrolling. Now, McNeil Warren, uh, there's no problem with him going out and making plays in coverage, and he can high point the ball and be aggressive in pass coverage too, and do things. But are you looking for a guy like McNeil Warren who you could say bring into not just cover tight ends, but take them on at the line of scrimmage and maybe even use as a blitzer like you can use with him and really play super downhill? Or are you looking for a guy to kind of patrol over the back? Because the way the Patriots really kind of want to play defense, Steve, is they want to penetrate with and get upfield with their front guys. It's different than the Belichick's offense. They're looking at playing more zone defense in the passing game than man, which is different than what they've done in the past. And I do think that they value the ranginess and the versatility and basically the safety net that Woodson brought to the defense last year. And I think they would want to pair that with somebody long term to kind of patrol. Because if you're going to play aggressive up front, Steve, you need those guys on the back end to make sure that, okay, yeah, you rolled the dice and brought an extra blitzer, but you gave up a 23-yard play, not a 63-yard play.
Yep, exactly. Look, and to me, I agree with everything you're saying. I think they're looking for those more kind of rangy guys that can do multiple things, rather than those just, body. Now, I'm not saying they wouldn't go after a body type, but I don't think they're looking for that, like kind of like that linebacker-ish, type of player. And there are some guys out there with good size that can move and cover some ground. And I think, look, when it comes to safety, I think you could make the argument for them going as high as the late second round, but I think more toward the third round, because there's a couple of safeties that, in that third round area that I think would be really good fits for them.
Yeah, and I agree. And there's some really interesting guys out there. Again, you have Downs, you have McNeil Warren, you have Thieneman, and Thieneman's a good player too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think he's going to be if the Patriots didn't have, for one, there's no guarantee that Thieneman's going to be there at 31. I mean, I'd put his range the same as McNeil Warren's. I don't really see him going in the top half of the first round, but somewhere in the middle of the first round, I don't see Thieneman getting out of the first round really. And if the Patriots had a couple other positions that I felt a little bit better about, I didn't feel like there was the urgency there, and maybe they were kind of putting the cherry on top of the roster versus still plugging some holes and building up pipelines at certain positional groups. I could see a player like him make a lot of sense for what he brings to the table. But I agree with you. I think they're probably looking at more of those day two day 2 or day 3 guys. But my next tier, Steve, and I don't. There's a couple of different guys in there for me, but a few of my favorites. I think Keontae Scott out of Miami. I have AJ Halsey from LSU. I do like Zachy Wheatley from Penn State. I like Kamari Ramsey a little bit at USC, but only in a specific role. And Bud Clark from TCU. I have those guys. There's a few others. Those guys are ones that I'll highlight for right now. I'll just start really briefly with a couple of those. I'll get to my Arizona guys. Okay, so before anyone gets at me for that, I'll talk about Genesis Smith as much as you want. But I do like what some of these guys bring to the table. I think pound for pound, dollar for dollar, and maybe this is kind of putting a twist, Steve, a little bit on what you already said. Personally, I think for what the Patriots need, the position that they're in with safety, the value is better for them for the type of player that you're going to be able to get in the second or third round at safety. Makes a lot more sense. As good as I think some of those top guys are going to be, there's some really good football players in here, and I'm a big fan of AJ Halsey, Steve.
Yep.
He just kind of there's just a lot that he can do. He plays downhill, he packs a punch, and I know he's not super rangy, but um, you do have Woodson for that. But the thing for me, the thing for me, Steve, is is that the type of player they want? Because I think that in years past, it would be he seems like a nice compliment to me for what Woodson brings to the table. It's hard to really this year, just as much as last year, Steve, and it's going to take a couple of years before we have it down to really pinpoint exactly who Vrabel and Wolf will want for their personnel versus basically the parameters are different. The grocery lists are different now that we're going to the store. They're not the same as Belichick before. It's not. So anyone who's like, well, this is the Patriot, perfect, prototypical Patriot, I have a hard time identifying exactly what a prototypical Patriot looks like right now. I have an idea, but I think it's hard to say right now.
Right. Yeah, because there's a different regime, and even though a lot of their philosophies are close to what Belichick ran, they they value different things, and you could start to see, the type of defense that they want to run. So yeah, it's tough to say, but look, I think with Woodson last year, they showed what kind of safety they were looking for. Um, now Pat teamed up with Byard. I mean, look, I think they have two really good safeties there, but you know, Byard's a little bit older. He's only, like you said, he's only on a 1 year deal, so I could see them, dipping their feet into the water earlier rather than later. And like you said, I like a lot of the same guys that you mentioned. Halsey from LSU. The one thing that stands out with him, 700 and something snaps on defense, not one penalty last year.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yep.
That shows a guy that plays within himself, and he doesn't, he doesn't get all out of position or whatever, but he does have a little bit of wildness in his tendencies at times, but I really like him. And I think, they bring him in and work him up. I think, boy, if you wanted to go 3 safety looks, they would be loaded for bear there.
Well, that's a good kind of way to kind of wrap this next thing in, Steve, because as I'm pulling up the Patriots roster, and again, this is just the depth chart for current guys or this isn't the depth chart, this is just the guys that they kind of have. So, as you're looking, at the secondary position in general, and let me just I had it organized, and of course now it's not. We'll get to cornerbacks in a second, but as you go back to defense, you go Marcellus Dial, Mike Brown, Kobe Minor. It's like I don't know how much you're going to get really out of any of those guys kind of on the back end. You don't know. Woodson's not going anywhere. I think they wanted to keep Hawkins, but they were okay with letting him go, which means they felt like they could upgrade over him. So I could see them at the very least. What I wanted to bring in Hawkins, what I wanted to bring up Hawkins specifically is at the very least, even if the Patriots don't take a safety in day 1 or day 2, meaning rounds 1 through 3, I think the fact that it seemed like it was pretty much Hawkins leaving to Baltimore and Kevin Byard being signed, I don't think was a one in, one out situation. I don't think those two really had a whole lot to do with each other. I think that the Patriots would have wanted Jalen Hawkins back at their number, and they felt like they didn't. They felt like Baltimore was giving him more money than they were willing to. It seemed like Hawkins wanted to come back. I know that there are people from Patriots.com who have expressed that on their shows too. So I don't know if Maybe they're looking for a Jalen Hawkins replacement. Maybe they think that Byard still has a couple of years in the tank, and they can bring his ball skills, which he had a career high last year, and his veteran savviness to kind of help mentor Woodson. And they just look for a guy in Hawkins who can be that third safety, as you said, and kind of be that. And I think that that's why it's almost a lock that they take a safety day 4, because I just think you look at the guys on the roster after Byard and Woodson, and you say, I think that there's, more to improve upon there. And whether that's, is it, I don't think Schooler is going to be taking on that third safety role. Del Pettis would be the biggest contender, and John Saunders is kind of an unknown too. So to me, I think that position is open, Steve, and that's where I see the fit there. If they take one early, I think it's looking at it as like, this is going to be this is going to be Woodson's next running mate. If they take one day 4, this is more of a, we're not thrilled with our depth. Let's see if we can get a third safety, some depth guy back there, in kind of that situation, beef up that part of the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, if Byard comes in and still shows he's operating at a very high level, which he did last year. I mean, he was all pro last year, led the league in interceptions, but because of his age, they threw out a 1-year thing, 1-year deal with him. But if he shows he can still, patrol back there at a high level, which I'm sure he can, that maybe they look at re-upping him for another year or two, and then whoever they do draft gives him time to develop. And as we mentioned earlier in the show here, I mean, there'll be times when they'll have 3 safeties on the field, and if you have a guy that some of the names that we mentioned that I think would be great additions, if you have 3 safeties like that on the field, then you're as they say down here in the South, you'll be peeing in a tall cotton, my friend.
Man, I guess, Steve, there's a player that I guess has really, really started to pique my interest more and more, and that is Bud Clark, out of TCU. Um, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like about him, and there's obviously hesitations. There's a reason he's projected to be drafted where he's drafted, but um, I think that this is a player that um, is a guy that maybe not ready to be a full-time starter right out the gate, but could be a starter if the Patriots go with the route of, hey, let's take a day 2 safety, and this is going to be the eventual Kevin Byard replacement to pair with Woodson. This would make some sense. Um, I think that he has great ball skills. Um, he can play all 3 downs. He plays the run well. I think he's smart with his eyes in terms of watching quarterbacks play. Um, I think he can play deep, intermediate, close. There's a lot to like about what he brings to the table. And yeah, I just think that the more I watch him, the more I'm kind of sold on him. I was a little hesitant before him being a 6-year senior and a few other things. But I'm officially, I think that he's worth, to me, if you want to take a gamble on a player that I think could be a guy that you could steal a starter in that day 2 range, I think he could be that guy and help an immediate need, being that rotational piece now.
Yeah, the only issue I had with him is he's a little thin.
Yep.
He kind of looks like a corner, but if you're going to use him more at deep safety, then I think that's okay. But he can definitely play, and like you said, he has the ball skills on the back end, and I think again, he's one of those guys. I think you can look at the crystal ball with him. You watch his tape and say this guy can be a starter.
100%. Yeah, I think it's hard to come away and not think that. Do you have anybody? I mentioned a few guys in there, and we'll be here all day if we talk about it in depth at all of them. But I was just
Yeah.
kind of throwing out a couple of names of guys that I really liked in that range. And those would be my others. The other one that I wanted to mention too, and this is no surprise to me because this seems obviously with them um having such a good year in Indiana. Lewis Moore, another guy who I really, yeah, to me, Steve, I just feel like he does everything well. And certainly reminds me of another, again, plug and play veteran. I don't see kind of not plug and play veteran, a plug and play player that kind of plays like a veteran. Maybe he's not going to be a star, but I think that there's a place in the league for him. At the very least, I see Lewis Moore as I would say, an incredibly safe pick, Steve.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at him, maybe day three, fourth or
It's gonna be
fifth round.
close. It's gonna be either he might squeak in at 3, but yeah, it's probably round 3, but or he'll be probably 4 or 5, round
Yeah,
4 or 5.
yeah, but yeah, and if you're taking him, then yeah, I agree with you. That's a safe pick, and you know, he's not the biggest guy. I think he's 5'10" or 5'11", but
Mm,
he's a good player. And I have to mention,
5'11", 200 is what I have here.
yep, okay, yep. I have to mention, Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you
Six,
did. I intentionally left there. That was intentional. Okay, but yeah, yeah. Why do I want to jump into
yeah, good
Kilgore? Jump into
size, right?
Kilgore, and anyone you want to mention?
Yeah, 6'1", 210, right?
Yeah.
Because of an injury, he was uh, thrust into the starting secondary as a true freshman, and he was a freshman All American. Um, and look, he the last couple of years he's led the team, with interceptions and whatnot. He's a guy that has a lot of range. Um, and again, sometimes he can play a little wild, but I think with good coaching you can rein that in. But I mean, the athleticism and the size that he brings to the position, because he's not just a thumper. I mean, he's got a lot of coverage skills too. And again, you're looking at third round, maybe he might even be available at the beginning of the fourth. But he's a guy I would keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a player that intrigues me. Had to leave him off the list for you, of course. And that
You got
makes
to have a
sense.
Gamecock on the roster.
Yeah. Yeah, we gotta get some more representation for you. And speaking of representation for me, I had someone ask about Genesis Smith. Um, as long as he's not asked to tackle, I'm in. That's a tough thing to say about a safety in the NFL. Um,
There's
I
another guy with good size. He's 6'2", you know.
he does it's if you take away the fact that he could be responsible for a solo tackle in an open field and he whiffed on a lot of them that led to longer gains, then if you can take that part out of it, he's a very interesting safety. He's great as a pass defender. He's fast and certainly straight. He's not maybe not sideline to sideline fast, but he can get up and go in a straight line. He has good ball skills. He can play kind of diagnose coverage on the back end. He does a lot of things well. If you talked about him as a surefire tackler, I think he's a lock for day 2 in the second or third round. Um, he's probably a top 75 pick. But because so many people are going to question his ability, when tackling, that's so tough to overcome. And it's either something where the light bulb is going to click on or not. But because there's that risk there, I think that he won't go until day 3. But if the Patriots are taking a day 3 guy, I think you could do a lot worse than Genesis Smith. I just think it's too rich for my blood in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah,
But
I
he's
can get on
intriguing though.
board with that. And again, I mean, he's got really good coverage skills, right? I mean, he can play the deep part of the field. It's just the only thing that that stands out negatively is the tackling issue. And if that's something they can work on at the next level, yeah, I think when you're looking at a day 3 pick, you could get on board with that easy.
Right. And look, I mean, Dalton Johnson is the other safety for Arizona. He intrigues me too. Um, he intrigues me too. Also going to be a day 3 pick, um, um, or undrafted. But I just think I ultimately just don't think he has the size to be a tackle, or sorry, a safety in the league to really hold up the way he needs to. But he's just not a corner. So, I mean, I don't think he's not tiny for a safety, but he's smaller. And I don't know. I think if Genesis Smith to me, um, would be the pick out of the two, but there's more boomer bust there. To me, day 3, there's always a reason in day 3. There are some players that always stand out, and there's usually a reason. To me, Genesis Smith is standing out because of the tackling. Maybe it's because of an injury, maybe it's because of fit or scheme they're coming from, or maybe it's size or speed, and that's kind of where you get some of those things too. So you do have to kind of work through that. But if you look, Steve, to that day 3 range and you keep going down the list, was there anybody else, or is there anyone in first or second, third round, anyone else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to mention?
No, because I liked a lot of the guys that you had already mentioned. The kid from Penn State,
Yeah,
Halsey.
Wheatley. Yep,
Yeah,
Zaki Wheatley's, and
all,
Kamari Ramsey, too, who I mentioned. Who Steve? I don't know if did you check out Kamari Ramsey at all? I don't know if you were able to do anything with him, but they played him a lot at corner this last year, and he got killed. He's not a corner. He is not he's not the third safety. He is not that third safety versatile piece. We can play him as the big nickel in the corner. No, this is a safety. So if you want to draft him and play him at safety, I'm in. You want to try to turn him into move him around, maybe a little corner. This is not the guy for that. But I do like him as strictly a safety.
Yeah.
Let's flip over, Steve, to go to corners. And let's start by quickly talking about the Patriots cornerback situation. Obviously, the deal with Christian Gonzalez has not been done. It might not get done right now. I don't know. I'm not really worried about whether that gets done or not. I think that they will get a deal done with him eventually, and he's not going anywhere, but it's something to at least mention. Carlton Davis, I think, was fine for a free agent. I think when he's healthy, it's okay, but he's kind of a trick or treat kind of a player. He'll have some nice interceptions and then he'll get burned or have a penalty. He's a grabby corner because of his length, and that gives guys problems. You've heard other receivers like Jamar Chase talk about how his length and arm length can give receivers trouble. I think they could do better, but I don't think a need is urgent. I think with corners, to me, Steve, especially with Alex Austin moving on in free agency too, I think you're looking at some depth pieces at corner. I think that absolutely, to me, I don't even really see a day 2 need for a corner, Steve. I mean, look, I think you could talk yourself into corners all day long. Like, to me, you always want to draft corners and receivers. You just never know.
Yeah.
But
You can never have enough good ones.
yeah, you can never have enough good corners. It's just so hard to play. But for me, I look at tackle, tight end, edge, linebacker, safety, receiver. There's so many positions that I just think more highly outrank the corner. So to me, when I'm looking at corners, obviously, there's Mansour Delane, there's Jermod McCoy. I would say those two are the top ones. my favorite corner in the entire my favorite corner in the entire class, one of my favorite players in the class is a guy that I'm taller of, which is D'Angelo Pons from Indiana, who's 5'9", 182. But I'm not sure, Steve. Another small slot cornerback is what the Patriots need per se.
Well,
But and that's no
but
knock
he's
on Marcus.
good.
But and that's no knock on Marcus Jones. I love Marcus Jones, but I think everyone understands my point. But D'Angelo Pons is a stud. So, Steve, to me, I guess there's a lot. I took the Gramus house to get there, but I did want to set the table for what the Patriots have. Do you agree with kind of where I'm thinking? If the Patriots draft a corner, I think they could use the depth. I just don't really see it until at the very earliest, late day 2. More likely, we're talking about rounds 4 to 7.
Exactly. Look, you have Christian Gonzalez. He's obviously your number one corner, but Carlton Davis, Marcus Jones, they're actually set for their starters. Now, as you said, you can never have enough good corners. In depth, you always want as many good guys that you can, because there'll be an injury or two, even if it's just for a couple of plays here and there. You want to be able to put guys out there that you can trust. But I agree with you. I don't see them addressing this because they have other needs. I mean, if somebody that they really, really like is available in round 3, maybe I could see that happening. But yeah, I think it's kind of a day 3 thing, and there'll still be some good corners on day 3 that will provide you some good depth.
Yep. Where do you want to kick it off? Anywhere
Well,
particularly?
because I'll mention this guy because I really like him. But I think he's more of an early 3rd round kind of guy from Ohio State, Davison. I'm going to butcher his name. Igbenam.
You're talking about the kid from Ohio State.
Yeah,
You're talking
yeah,
about
Davison Igbenam. I
yeah.
butcher his name every time.
Yep,
But he's a good
Igbenogson is the way I would say it. But
yeah,
yeah,
6'2", 190. He runs a 4.45, I think it was. And and I really like him. But do I want to address safety in the 3rd round? I mean, corner in the 3rd round? I'm not so sure. So, I think you're probably looking at 4th rounders at the earliest. And there's some good ones, right? I like Devin Moore from Florida,
yep,
bigger guy.
yep. He's not a burner. He's not a burner, but
No,
he has a ton of size.
yes. And, he ran, I think it was a 4.5 flat. But he's got that length that you really like. He played in the SEC, so he's covered some really good receivers. Um, um, who else do I like in round 4?
I'll talk about one of my guys, and because
Yep,
he's from my school anyway, and that's Traden Stukes from Arizona.
yep.
So I'm not as high on the safeties, but I am high on Stukes. I especially for the Patriots. There's a reason I wanted to bring him up. Uh, excuse me. So I think for me, Steve, what comes out for Stukes, there's a couple things that I really like. For one, um, he ran in the 4.3s, fast guy. It translates on the field. He did a lot. He played all over the field, and this is why I think that it would make a lot of sense for the Patriots. He's a zone. He's a zone slot corner or a nickel cornerback, and which I do think. Obviously, the Patriots play more zone now, and they have a need more there. He has a size, has a speed. Didn't really do. He didn't. He had a fine high school career, but was not scouted at all. Works his way on. Works his way on to Arizona. I think he only played I want to say it was somewhere in the 60s. It's off the top, not it's on the top of my head. I think he only played like 60 something snaps during COVID. And then he just started kind of taking off. Um, there is at when you're talking about a guy that runs in the 4.3s and is 6'2", 195, he could be the blend of corner and safety, big nickel that they're actually looking for. And to me, the reason I like him more is I think he's just a better football player than Smith, and if he does project to more of a coverage type safety, um, versus more of a traditional corner, I think he's kind of matchup based, and his size, speed, and ball skills, to me, you wanna match him up with guys like tight ends because I don't think you have a guy that you feel really good about that, and I think Stooks is worth mentioning specifically for where the Patriots, I think, are targeting a guy, and I do think his projected range is day 3, and that's where it will be had, so a guy that I want because I talked about the other guys, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about where his fit's gonna be, I included him at corner because it kinda worked itself out that way, but I do think that's a name worth Patriots fans getting familiar with.
Yeah, another guy I like, probably late fourth, early fifth round, um, comes from a smaller school. Charles Demings from Stephen F. Austin.
Ooh.
Somebody turned me on to him. He's got good length, 6'1", about 195. Um, he's probably got some seasoning to do in the NFL, but like as we said, the Patriots starters are already locked into place. But he has that ability to cover. He's pretty athletic. He's mentally tough. You're looking for that depth on defense, and I think he's a guy that could bring that, right? Because again, we're not looking for a guy to step in and say, "Oh, here's your number 2 corner." I mean, they already have that. So I think he has some learning to do, and he can do that, especially with Gonzalez and the other safeties they already have on the team. So I just think you're looking for a guy in the middle of day 3. He's a guy that stands out. Another guy, Will Lee from Texas A&M, another big guy, right? He's a little on the slow side though, but got great length,
Mhm.
So
I I, I feel like, um, I just wanna mention 2 guys. There's 3 guys I wanna mention quickly. Um, I do have Mansour Delane as the top cornerback in the class. McCoy does scare me a little bit, obviously, but he was so good 2 years ago in 2024 that certainly worth mentioning. Um, if the Patriots were to take a cornerback high, I do feel like the other name that's worth mentioning, and again, I know that we're both saying that we don't see it, but it's hard to not talk about this player when he literally is, I would say, he's comped regularly to a player that you already have on the roster, and that's Tennessee's Colton Hood. Um, he brings a lot to the table, and a lot of people, including a lot of the big draft guys, Chad Reuter and Lance Zierlein, even on his I have his NFL profile draft profile on NFL.com, and he has him at quote, and he has him as Carlton Davis, and it is something that's worth mentioning because
mhm.
um he's a good tackler, he's rangy, and if you want to get cheaper, because let's be honest, like now this cornerback would surprise me, but the reason I think that it's worth noting is the Patriots need to pay Christian Gonzalez. They're going to need to pay Drake May. If they are going to acquire AJ Brown, which we really don't know if that's going to happen or not, but there's a lot of speculation. At least until June, we are not going to really know. So we'll find out, I guess, then. Maybe over the draft weekend, we'll find out. But there's some bigger money contracts coming in. And if you're looking at now we've been looking at this as, well, how does the roster look right now? But the other fun game to play with these roster teams is follow the money. So if you're about to hand a cornerback, Steve, and Christian Gonzalez, $100 million, 120, 150, whatever that number is going to be, $30+ million a year. Do you think that it's fair to say that they could be looking to maybe get cheaper at that same position? What's one way to do that? Drafting a player that could be Carlton Davis's replacement. You draft Carlton Davis this year, or you draft Colton Hood this year.
Yeah.
Pair him up with Christian Gonzalez, Marcus Jones, Carlton Davis, and then, hey, maybe you trade him at the deadline if the season's not going your way. Maybe you get rid of him a year early and you get cheaper because Gonzalez's new contract kicks in next year, and it becomes a little bit more affordable on the books, so you're not allocating so much of the cap to one position. I don't know if that's I'm not saying that's what's going to happen or that's what they're thinking, but I don't think it's stupid to at least bring up that
No,
point.
and that's a great point because you could be looking. Yeah, you draft a guy like him who's excellent in press man, right? And so you're looking at him now, and he's scrappy too. I like that. So you pair him up with Gonzalez, you have two really good cover guys. And then maybe after 2026, you cut Carlton Davis loose, not saying that he's not a good player. I think he's an excellent player.
No, but sometimes but as you're trying to get
it's a
younger and
money thing,
cheaper,
right?
money is a factor. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I don't know what they think of Colton Hood. And I liked him.
Right.
I think
But
I think
it's
where
worth
he's
noting.
projected to go and what he's projected to be, it's worth at least noting. Now, maybe they feel like Marcus Jones can't be their only slot guy and they need more of a slot. They need to add to it. I think they need another good slot cornerback. I think that they miss Jonathan Jones at times, ever since he moved on to, was it Washington, I want to say? So, like, there are guys to talk about in day two. So if they go and surprise us, Steve, in the first, second, third round, we'll obviously absolutely cover it. But I do feel like it's gonna be one of those situations where it'll be interesting to see how big of a need do they think it is, or do they already have a veteran in mind? Maybe I don't know. I mean, don't forget we're working on an incomplete picture of their current roster, and we don't know what they feel about the money situation. We don't know what their real cap number is. Real cap meaning set by what they are allowed to spend from upstairs,
Yeah.
and things like that. So there are things that we just can't possibly know, but I think the conversations are worth having. So cornerback, obviously, Steve, not a huge long conversation. We do try to mention some names, talk about guys that stood out to us. But I also think it's fun to talk about the scenarios and how it could apply to the Patriots. Cornerback, safety, definitely need there. It'll be curious to see what the plan is and what they feel like the urgency of that position will be. And that will be told to us a little bit, partially, by how the draft goes. Of course, it does depend how the board falls, and it's a cliche answer, but it does matter. I still think that if the season were about ready to start today, I'd be saying they need more help at corner. And I think that they feel the same way, but I just think that there are more pressing needs ahead of them at this point.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, look, I think their starters are locked in. Now, if anything was to happen to any of them, injury wise, then, that's when you're looking at your depth and saying, okay, we're not set up for this. So, do I think they're going to address it? Absolutely. And, there's still some guys out there in free agency that might still, or after the draft, that might get released. You never know. So who they covet when they do this. So
Yeah. Nope. I it depends on not only which players they like just as people and from the digging they've done and the medicals, but also what they covet in skill set.
Yep.
And I think there's those there's that's why this process is fun and hard. Um, as from someone, Steve, sitting outside the building, there are we always say this, and look, everybody who is a fan of these teams and like the draft process, and if you're listening to this show, you certainly do, or you're in just a horrifically wrong place. But but I would say that's what obviously makes it, more and more difficult, because there are those X factors there. But, that'll do it for this wrap up, though, Steve, for cornerbacks and safeties. We will be back next week to talk about the front seven, linebackers, edge players, defensive linemen. We'll be doing that hopefully with Mike as well, and we'll be talking about that. And I think that's a great spot too. We started with tight ends and receivers, kind of some splashy stuff. Let's talk about some splashy guys on the back end who I certainly think will be in the first or second round conversation there. So we will absolutely do that, and we could have a show very soon. We're hoping to get a special guest on for you, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Before we go, Steve, any final thoughts?
No, I like a lot of these guys that we mentioned in the back end, and look, they're not, you know, the needs that they have elsewhere, but at the same time, there's still needs. I mean, and as Vrabel has been quick to point out, they're still early in the rebuild process. I
Yep.
mean, they're only in year two. They were so far ahead of where they really should have been last year in making it all the way to the Super Bowl. I mean, but at the same time, I think they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, yeah. I think that my final thoughts to me is I haven't reached draft fatigue, Steve. I haven't gotten to that point. I think it's partially because we started really focusing more on the offseason, free agency, draft, all that stuff, not until mid-February versus mid-October has been some of the darker years the last couple of years. So it did shift that a bit. I certainly feel less prepared than years past in some ways. I'm playing catch up more and more, but as we're working our way around the horn. And I just think that I'm ready for the draft to start, though, because we have a little bit of a lull and it's a good little break. But now we're going to get a influx of news here in a couple weeks, and there's some more juicy rumors.
Two
But
weeks from tomorrow.
I know it's exciting. But thanks again for listening to this episode of Patriots No Huddle. Again, brought to you by PatsFans.com. For Steve Balistrieri, I'm Derek Havens. We'll talk to you guys soon.